giving us all hope. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I call Jim Mallister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This debate, not for the first time, is irrelevant in terms largely of the House's capacity to approve or otherwise largely passing regulations, but it does provide a useful opportunity to take stock of where we are in respect of COVID issues. And I do have to say to the House that I'm becoming increasingly concerned about where the exit strategy is in respect of COVID. We will all recall that when all of this started almost a year ago, it was drummed into us all that the key determinant in all of this was the R number. Today, when the Minister happily referred to the R number in January and was then asked, well, what is it today? There was a lot more foot shifting as to what it actually meant. And suddenly the R number is no longer the be-all and end-all because, of course, the R number now, on a sustained basis, is, we are told, significantly below 1, which was the magic threshold. And yet, we are told all the lockdown essentially must continue now endlessly. I remember before Christmas, probably back about October time, asking the Minister in this House what was his exit strategy. And he put it in one word: vaccination. Well, now we are very well down the road, and I want to compliment the Health Service and the professionals who have selfishly brought us to the very desirable position of having 500,000 of our population already vaccinated. And that is a remarkable and fantastic achievement. But even with 500,000, and that being the most vulnerable in our society, it does not seem to be bringing the relief that was promised on the back of vaccination for the easing of lockdown. It seems that every time there is some light at the end of that tunnel, that you're going to rely on someone like Dr. McBride to go out and order more tunnel. And he took us this time right through to next year. You know, if the answer was the R rate, and it turned out not to be, if the answer was vaccination and the fact that we're way down the road on it and it doesn't really help us, then what is the answer? Yes?
I thank the member for giving way, and while he makes interesting points in relation to the commentary from CMO or others, but would he equally agree that it is also the case that there is a lustful desire among some within the media to put across the need for continued restrictions? Because, and I note the Minister did clarify this actually on the following day, some of the words that the CMO said actually were taken out of context and compared to actually what the reality was.
Oh yes, we have many ministers of health in the media, many, and they're not shy about sharing their expertise. But it is a serious point that, you know, where is the exit strategy if it's not vaccination? And how can it be if so many of our vulnerable happily have been vaccinated that there is no opening up and obvious preparation for that? Take what we got on schools. The most absurd, illogical outcome that was imaginable last Thursday, that suddenly P1 and to 3 will go back into school, but in order to let forms 12 to 14 in different schools go into school, you have to take out from the primary schools P1 to P3. Where is the logic in that? I suggest it is so absurd that no one could defend it. And yet that, we are told, is the product. We're told today in this debate that that wasn't what the Education Minister wanted, but that's what health officials wanted. Well, no doubt the Health Minister, in answering this debate, will tell us, is that so? Did the Health Department say, if you're going to open schools, it can only be P1 and P3, and for 2 weeks, then, yes, hokey-cokey them out and put in to different schools forms 12 to 14. Is that what the Health Department recommended? Is that what the Health Department insisted on? Or was that absurd outcome the product of an ugly compromise, where some didn't want anything opened, some wanted everything opened in terms of schools, and in the middle, this crazy creation emerged? Well, let's put 1 and 3 in and take them out again, etc., etc. I think the public are entitled to know. And I do think that sometimes maybe we as politicians lose a bit of a grip on reality. We have kids, and it's most critical in our primary schools, who effectively have been out of regular education for the guts of a year. You take a 7-year-old. A year is a very long time in the life of that child. I see it in my own grandchildren. The absence of school, no matter how good the homeschooling is, it's not the same. And those kids are losing. We put P1 to P3 in, but not a mention of P6. Someone might have just thought that of all the years in primary education, P6 for many is the most important. But it doesn't even feature. It's after Easter. So I do say, where is the hope in this vista of hopelessness in respect of our kids? Yes?
I thank the member for giving way, and his point around school and the need for immediate face-to-face teaching is a critical one, and one that I share. And would he agree with me that it's been quite useful to watch the commentary coming from, I think it was the PHA and others, to say, oh, schools weren't the place of infection, and that we were told by some within the media and some within this House who continually put pressure upon the Minister of Education to close our schools for the sake of their own political advantage. They played politics with our children's education. That's what I find regrettable. I'm sure the member would agree.
I think one of the most disgraceful episodes of this over the past year has been the playing of politics with our school. We had what should have been a non-divisive issue turned into a wholly divisive issue about whether or not our schools should be opened or closed. And because the Republic of Ireland was doing some things, then Sinn Féin required that to be the position, etc., etc. And throughout all of this, the pawns in that, in many instances, have been our kids. That is not acceptable. That has to end. We need to get our children back into school. You know, you take the situation in England. Professor Whitty says it's safe. And I must say, I'm unfamiliar with any evidence that primary schools are ramping breeding grounds for COVID. Professor Whitty says, safe, sound, send them back. Dr. McBride, we assume, though I think it was Mr. Given quoted, that it was supposed to be the united view of the 4 nations' chief medical officers. He, on home turf, seems to say something quite different. I suppose, forgive me, but I will make this point. When you have advice from medical experts, the danger of our system of government is that it gets corrupted by the politics. When you have a system such as Westminster's, where medical advisors say this is what needs to be done, and the advice is taken and it's done. But here, because you have this unworkable system of mandatory coalition, you end up with some mongrelization of what is the proposition. And you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and no one ends up satisfied, and certainly the public are not well served. So
Order. I have shown considerable latitude. We are here today to discuss legislation about 3 items of regulations, and I would urge the member to refer to them. Mr. Allister.
Oh, Deputy Speaker, I was taking my cue from everyone else who's spoken in this debate, including some very significant and prominent people, like a former minister. So I really don't think I should be picked upon in that respect. But I will.
Order. Can I assure the member I am not picking upon you? I've always endeavoured to carry out this role in a consistent manner and a manner which is appropriate to the legislation which is in front of us. And I hope you recognise I have given you considerable latitude already. Mr. Allister, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I would ask for your confirmation in this, but one of the regulations that we're discussing today, SR 2020-118, amends the date that the Department of Health must review the need for restrictions and requirements imposed by the principal regulations on or before the 18th of February 2021, and amends the expiry date of the principal regulations to midnight 5th of March 2021. Would it be my knowledge that that would then therefore have the remit to discuss any of the regulations that are before the House today? March.
And I have not heard it referred to. I call Mr. Allister.
Deputy Speaker, could I refer to the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions number 2 regulations, upon which all of what we're discussing is rooted. Without the number 2 regulations, which is the overarching current regulations, then we wouldn't be having any of this debate. And it's those regulations which, in their various manifestations, impose the different restrictions. And I want to address those restrictions and the logic for them and the need for them, or otherwise. I've dealt with the schools issue. I think it was Mr. Putz, and it's good to see him back. Mr. Putz referred to the fact that we hear much concern about people's mental health, and well might we, and the advantage of the outdoors. And yet the Executive keeps coming into springtime, our garden centres closed. Where you get the very wherewithal for those who are gardeners to engage in gardening, the Executive says, no, bolt those doors. You'll not get in there. You'll not get your plants. Oh yes, you'll get them if you go to a huge supermarket, a multinational, but you'll not get them from the guy who depends for his survival, the independent operator who depends on the few months from March to July to survive. You'll not get them from him. Why? Where is the logic in closing our garden centres? Where is the logic in closing our golf courses? We're told, take your exercise, do all those things. I'm not a golfer, but I can well understand that those who are cannot comprehend how it is going out 2, 3, 4 people together, socially distanced, that they can't walk the golf course and play golf, but a citizen can come along and walk the golf course with their dog. Where is the logic in that? Surely, if we're ever going to hold credibility to these regulations and not see them begin to fray at the edges, surely they're going to have to be compellingly sensible. They're going to have to embrace common sense above all else. So I do say there is much work to be done in terms of putting things in order. We cannot go on as we are, and I do hope that what the Prime Minister said yesterday will be a wake-up call for this Executive, that we cannot allow a situation to develop whereby the rest of the United Kingdom, and most particularly the larger part of it, with almost similar R-rate numbers, is moving ahead towards freedom, and we are enslaved in regulations which are well past their sell-by date. We really need to get with the programme, and the programme should be reopening this economy, getting us back to as much normality as possible, confident in the knowledge that we have an ever-evolving and increasing scheme of vaccination, which must surely be doing the job that we're promised. I hope, Deputy Speaker, that we're not going to be held back in that journey because of the adverse differential with the Irish Republic. I hope the fact that the Irish Republic is falling away behind as an EU country on vaccination will not be a reason for some to say, oh, Northern Ireland has to wait to catch up. We fear people coming in unvaccinated. Sorry, if Northern Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, has had the great blessing and benefit of being able to get ahead with one of the best vaccination systems in the world, then our people must see the advantage of that. And if there is a problem from the Irish Republic, then the answer lies in restrictions on entry from the Irish Republic. The Garda have shown they're willing to restrict people going north-south. Why are we being so diffident from south to north if that's a problem? And I do trust the Health Minister, if it becomes an identifiable issue, that there is a threat to our public health because of the low level of vaccination in the Republic, that he will not shy away from bringing the regulations that would probably come in his name in respect of restrictions. I often notice that when there's a harder job to be done on this front, it tends to be the health ministers that's sent here. I think sometimes maybe advantage is taken of his good nature and his capacity to cope with these things. But I do say to this House, in all seriousness, we really can't go on as we are. Yes?
And I appreciate the member giving way, and it's on that point of enforcement, and I referenced it earlier in my own contribution, but just to put on the record, when I asked the Minister for Justice about this very issue, her response is such consideration would be a matter